Hello, hello, hello. We are back with another episode of the Jane Warren podcast, and I have another incredible guest today. I have Adrienne Dyer. She is a nonfiction book coach and a ghostwriter. She has also figured out a way to use creativity to truly bring joy and fulfillment into her daily life. And that is what we're going to talk about today. Y'all know how much I love joy and fulfillment and happiness. So we're going to talk specifically on creativity and how this comes into play. So Adrienne, thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much, Jane. It's so amazing to be here, and thank you for having me on the show.
This is going to be great. Adrienne and I met through Women Thrive. So a lot of my guests that I've had, we've all met through this incredible summit that's happening in March. And we just had a little chit chat right now before this. And I was like, okay, we got to hit record because we are saying some good things. So before we dive into this, Adrienne, thank you, listeners. If this is the first time you're listening, we want to thank you for listening. Share a little bit about you, share a little bit about your journey, and how did you come to this place right now where, you're so passionate about using creativity to bring more joy into your life?
Yes, absolutely. I'd love to talk about that. I always joke that if I weren't coaching, helping people write books, I would be a creativity coach. And I think that might be where my career is actually going one day, because this is my favorite topic. I think, I grew up in a household of women who were handcrafters. And, my dad was a carpenter. He made his living building kitchen cabinets. And when I was a kid, our house was full of planters and armoires and bunk beds and things that he had made himself. And my mom taught me, I think when I was about 5 years old, 4 or 5 years old, she started teaching me how to latch hook and embroider and cross stitch and crochet, knit, everything, you name it. And when I was a teenager, we had a ceramics studio and we taught classes. And I used to teach, I think when I was quite young, I was like 11 or 12, I was going up there and helping my mom teach classes on ceramics and helping her make things that she would sell and stuff like that. So I think there's sort of two things there. It's where my love of being an entrepreneur was born. And then also just that sort of creativity built into daily life has just been the way, that's all I've ever known. And we were always trying new things and exploring. And sometimes, like my sister loved to knit. She became a knitwear designer, and I didn't really like knitting, but I love crochet. And there's just all these different things. And so, I've been also a storyteller, I think, my whole life, very attracted to stories from a little tiny age. We were always watching old Hollywood movies and things like that. And I always found with people I find so fascinating, I always wanted to know, what is their story? So what's the backstory and what drives them and what are they thinking? And I always just been kind of like an observer. And I think I was really drawn to the written word from a young age too. I used to sit in my room and write little like teenage romances all the time.
That's so cute.
Yeah, I would take my pot of tea and toast down to my room and just write stories. And so I think for me, just being creative, I think that a lot of people think to themselves, what does it mean to be creative? Or am I creative? Or I hear people say all the time, I'm not creative. I haven't got a creative bone in my body. But my response to that is creativity is our human nature. It's part of our DNA. Creativity is, we wouldn't be able to innovate. We wouldn't be able to invent things. So creativity doesn't necessarily mean any certain thing. It doesn't mean, well, I'm a painter, or creativity doesn't even need to mean art. It's just our human ability to make things and have ideas. Ideas are creative. All of those things constitute creativity. And just like I think we're all natural born storytellers, creativity is also just baked into us as humans. And so that's kind of, I think whatever I've been doing in my life, creativity has always been at the center, even if it's not, when I was younger, I worked for the government and I had financial positions. So when I worked in that kind of environment, I was always doing things at home on the weekend, making things or baking or writing romance novels still, or whatever that was. So I think it's just really important to kind of, you know, figure out what that means to you, what is creativity to you, and then really nurture that and save a little bit of time in your day and your week for that exploration.
That's
Yeah.
beautiful. And I love, how you shared about your upbringing and growing up with surrounded by that type of creativity. I feel similar. I mean, I'd say my parents are more like hobbyists. Like they love a hobby. Specifically my mom. She does, calligraphy, she does cross stitch, she tried knitting. Usually her knitting projects kind of end possibly without something being finished, but you know, and which is fine, she
Yeah.
started, so that's okay. I know for a fact when I was younger, my nan, they were knitting sweaters and mine got finished during the visit. My nan is, I'm from Newfoundland actually. So she was visiting for Newfoundland and she finished my sweater. My mom did not finish my twin sister's. Poor thing, never got her sweater. But, the thing that was so beautiful about it though, that I love so much is my parents really encouraged our individuality. I'm actually a twin as well. So they encouraged our individuality. They, across, even there's 4 siblings in my family, and we're all very different. And I definitely was the type that was always doing things. I was in drawing. I love to draw. So I was in drawing classes. I loved art things. I was sporty. So I loved playing sports. So they had me in like basketball, soccer, art classes. When I was at home, like I was always outside doing things. So I think a way, and tell me when you're working with your clients and you're trying to really encourage this creativity and joy, I feel like this ties closely with almost allowing ourselves to be a kid again, allowing ourselves to be a little playful and maybe tap into some. Do you ever do daydreaming or anything like that with your clients? Because I think like someone might be listening and being like, okay, exactly like you said, I'm not creative. I don't like to draw because I think we associate creativity with what I don't know, what we see, right? We associate it with, well, I don't like to like act on stages. I don't want to be in theater. Oh, I'm not like these types of things. But how do you really get your clients to tap into that? Like, do you get them to daydream? What types of things do you do?
So the first thing on our very first call, I always send them home with a journaling exercise, and that is, imagine it's 5 years into the future, and what does your life look like because you wrote this book? And we talk about, financially, personally, and professionally, what does that look like? But I make them go really deep, like paint the picture. When I did this for myself, when I was starting my book that I'm working on now about how to write a book, um, I wrote, like I said, like you said, I daydreamed. It was like I have a small swimming pool, and I've got a big open kitchen, and there's big French doors leading out onto this terrace, this lovely little patio, and the garden is kind of English country garden, and there's a little greenhouse over there, and that's where I go and sit and paint my flowers, and I just wove this story about where I saw myself in 5 years. And I was talking about all of what I saw my daily schedule looking like. How many hours a day was I working, and what was I doing, and who was I working with? And so I really get my clients to just kind of daydream, like you said, about what. So it's a way to tap into, okay, these are my goals, and this is what's really in my heart, and kind of digging a little bit deeper beyond just kind of the surface level. This is why I want to write a book. I want to write a book to grow my business or whatever. Well, what does that actually look like? Who are you working with? And so that starts to unlock their brain, and it starts to get them to really. I just love that you use that word daydream, because it is so perfect. It so perfectly describes what, I think we need to spend a little bit more time doing, even in relation to our businesses, and going deeper, like picturing what that life looks like and just letting yourself play. It's like letting the mind play. So we need to play as humans, we need to play more, but we also need to let our minds play. And journaling is one of the best ways to do that, and just giving yourself the freedom. And I always encourage people to go out and buy a fancy notebook, or whatever, or maybe maybe their version of journaling is more like a meditation, or maybe their version is going out for a walk and just thinking about it. And whatever that looks like for you, just spend some time going down that road and letting your mind play with the possibilities. Um, and then the other thing that really unlocks people's creativity, especially in terms of writing a book and a business book, is just talking about it. Because when we have a conversation and we just start brainstorming and throwing ideas out and bouncing those ideas off with someone else, in the way that naturally happens in my conversations with my clients when we're on our coaching calls, that is really powerful, because when we're writing things, our editor's brain gets in the way and it starts to lock down that creative process a little bit. And so when we talk about things verbally, like, humans are natural born storytellers. That's just the way we're just designed to use words, the spoken word, to tap into those deeper creative centers in our brain. So I think that just the process that we go through during the coaching process and writing the book unlocks creativity in that way, just because we're talking through things and new ideas pop into their heads. And they always just say, wow, I never thought of it like that before. And, and I ask questions and things that sparks the new idea. And sometimes that actually makes the book go in a whole different direction, or they might have this amazing idea that they now build into a pre-existing course that now becomes like a sub course or another whole section or a lesson, and sometimes it even, an idea they'll spark an idea for another whole book. I was just on a coaching call just before this call with a client who we were working through his outline in his book, and all of a sudden he said, oh, I just had an idea for my next book. And so we actually started a little thing section down on the bottom of his outline, and it's like future book ideas, and I'm starting to write those down so that when we're chatting through things, when those ideas pop up, we just record them there. So I think it's like you said, it's allowing yourself to daydream and allowing yourself to play more, because as adults we stop playing somewhere along the line. We stop playing. I really recommend the book The Artist Way by Julia Cameron. I don't know if you've ever read that book.
I haven't, but I'll have to
But
check that out.
yeah, it's a wonderful book, and it's written in a way that you're supposed to read it over a 12-week period and do what she calls morning pages. And morning pages are just like a daily brain dump, where the goal is to write at least 3 pages every morning. And it can just be like, even if you're just sitting there going, I don't know what to write today, I have nothing on my mind. Next thing you know, maybe in the beginning, you might even just find yourself complaining about all the things that annoy you. But it's really just a way of clearing the clutter out of your mind. And something magical happens when we write things down. Our brains and our hands are connected in that way, and we start to kind of unlock new ideas and things. But the other piece of what she teaches is that you take yourself on an artist date. So every week for an hour or two, you do something where you just something that fulfills you. You might be going to a play or go to a movie by yourself, or go buy your favorite magazine, the latest issue, and sit in a coffee shop and just enjoy the magazine, or whatever that looks like, because that's how adults play, and that's how we figure out how we play and the things that we like to do for play. Because I think we somewhere along the line we forget all about what play is and how to play. And that might mean like something physical where you go play tennis with somebody or whatever that is. But when we allow ourselves to daydream and play, this naturally just unlocks that creative flow and the creative process. And it also opens us up to new ideas, because we have different experiences, and that can unlock other ideas and other, just spark the imagination. So yeah.
Oh my gosh, so many tidbits in there. I'm like, mental note, mental note, mental note, as you're going through. I'm like, do I work backwards or forwards? Sometimes my brain works backwards, like go with the thing you most said, but I'm gonna touch on the journaling aspect. So I am a major advocate for journaling. I think it's very powerful. I know for myself, and I would consider myself, creative in my own way, definitely a very creative person, but I can struggle with visualization initially. Like if someone was like, oh, like, what do you dream about? Right? What would you really want? Like initially when I was asked that question, I closed my eyes and see like a blank slate. Like I'm like, but there's so many things I know I want. So I actually did the activity that you get your clients to do. And I wrote out my dream day from start to finish. And I read that like basically almost every night. I'll read it out loud and I give details. Like, and people that have listened to my podcast before have heard me speak about this, but I wake up in a villa at the beach and I can hear the ocean waves. I can smell the ocean breeze coming in. Like I get very detailed, I go out and sit on the terrace, watch the sunrise as I journal, like I make a coffee, walk down the beach. Like I put all these things on how I feel too, like really tapping into the feelings that like I feel calm, I feel at peace, I feel in flow, like all these ways I want to feel, because in everyday life, sometimes I feel stressed, overwhelmed, all this, but I don't want to be feeling that way. So I put it all down from start to finish, from the second I wake up all the way to the time I go to bed. I wrote it all out in a couple pages. And that really, and now again, I've written that a few times. You can write at different times. You have new ideas. But what this does, really, the only limit that we have is our mind. That's the only limit we really put on ourselves. And it's created in our mind. So really, like you're saying, allow yourself to play, allow yourself to dream, to whatever you want. Nothing is off limits, this beautiful beach villa with an expansive kitchen and like floor to ceiling windows and a beautiful bright office space, and like, anything, whatever I want is mine and it's my dream. But how this really is so powerful too is we speak what we want into existence. So the more you're speaking about it, and you touched on, speaking about what you want and talking about it. And I think there's like two sides to this, because sometimes we may share what we want with the wrong people. And I say that because I call them dream killers, because, they don't see it. Like they're just like, well, that sounds hard. Like how would you do that? You know what I mean? But that's not really what it's about. So if you find yourself, if you're listening and you're like, well, I have these dreams. Yeah, I've tried sharing them before with like my friends or my partner or my family, and they just didn't get it. Just know you're not alone, because I have some of my closest friends, I don't even say, like, the things that are going to happen for me, I don't even say it, because they're just not, they don't have the same perspective I do. And that's fine. But find people like myself and Adrienne, find people that you can share this with, that we're going to encourage you, because you're right. The more you talk about it, you start to speak it out loud, you start to believe it, you start to believe that it's possible for you. And that's when you start maybe taking those actions. And some of these actions are as simple, I get a lot of joy from being out in nature. So maybe here in Toronto right now, I go for a walk down to the water. In my dream, I'm walking along the beach, but I'm doing something that brings me so much joy. I love being around water. So my version of it today is down at the lake. My version of it, maybe in a couple months or next year, is at the ocean. But this is really like how we start to make things happen, because everything starts as an idea. Literally, everything starts as an idea. And then it's you choose what you want to do with it.
Yeah, it's so powerful what you said, because there's so many ways to, bring something, a dream into existence. But it starts with having the dream in the first place. And when you articulate it, not only do you start to unlock the creative power of your brain, which is obviously going to help you figure out how to get there, but now you've focused yourself too. It's like, okay, I understand now what I really want. And that is an always evolving process too. But at least for now, it's really hard to get where you want to go when you don't even know where you want to go. How can you create a roadmap when you don't even know the destination? So even just allowing ourselves to have several dreams, like it doesn't have to even just be one. You're unlocking your creativity, because I think it's like a muscle that you have to practice, and it can shrivel up or it can get blocked. That's one reason why I really recommend to, if you're listening, I recommend you go out and buy Julia Cameron's The Artist's Way and get her Morning Pages journal companion book, because she sort of integrates the key lessons of the book right into the journal. And it's enough, there's enough pages in there to do the morning pages every day for 12 weeks. And because that's what it is all about. The whole entire book and is about taking you through a process of unblocking your creativity. And really just, those two things, focusing on the morning pages and the artist date, those are so powerful. But it's also, there's things like you said, getting out in nature. Nature is so important and so powerful, just to us as humans. And sometimes that can just be going to a park. If you live in the city, maybe it's like a rooftop patio, or maybe there's a little coffee shop that you love that has a cute little terrace with really pretty plants.
I have
And
one of those.
yeah. So whatever you need to do to kind of feel connected to the bigger universe, connected to nature, connected to the earth, connected to growth and life and vitality and vibrance. Those things are so powerful, and we, they affect us in our subconscious. We're not always using, like I think I was listening to an earlier podcast of yours where your guest was talking about how most of it was like 95% of what we think is all subconscious. So we can feed that subconscious, and what if we're putting garbage in, we might get garbage out. So just staying aware of kind of just what we're feeding our subconscious mind, and if we're feeding it beautiful images, and if you're the type of person that has trouble visualizing things, like you said, that's really important, because it might be easy for me to say, I have a very vivid picture centered mind. When I think of it's always in pictures and colors and light and sound and things like that, but that's not the way that everybody thinks. That doesn't mean that you're not creative and you don't have an imagination. Not at all. It just means that it looks different for you. So, just finding ways to kind of like, maybe you need to have a visual representation. So that's why I love things like vision boards, because then if you don't have the kind of mind where you can really picture things solidly, or even, just for me, like I love that's why I love Pinterest. I just go on there just to look at beautiful images of things, because it just makes me feel it makes me feel so happy. And so if you have something on your wall that you can look at every day that reminds you of what that vision is, if it represents your vision in that way, then that's also helpful too. But, and like you said, just going back to the journaling, because when I started the Reading the Artist Way, and that was in 2021, and I kind of thought, well, I make my living as a writer. I've been writing for 18 years professionally. I write freelance magazine articles. I write romance novels. I write children's books. I write nonfiction books. And here I am thinking, I'm not blocked creatively, but I'm telling you, when I started journaling, and I always thought, journaling's kind of been one of those things where I would do it off and on. And I always kind of thought, well, I know that I should, and people say there's so much power in it, but I felt like it was like this self-discipline thing. But really it just became this place where I could brain dump. It's like Julia Cameron refers to the morning pages as windshield wipers for the soul. So you can just dump all that stuff out onto the page that's maybe worrying you, or fears or stressful things. And so then that just gives your mind, it's like a clean desk to work from. So I think that kind of thing is so helpful. And now it's my go-to if I need to think something through, or I'm confused, or I'm feeling anxious or stressed. It's like I can tell I need to journal. I haven't journal, and I just go straight to my journal, and that's where I do all my problem solving. It's where I brainstorm all my best ideas. I map out new courses and my book, or whatever it is that I'm working on in my business. That way, it all goes into my journal. And anything that's troubling me, it all goes in there too. And usually by the time I'm finished writing it out, I've got the solution to whatever my problem was. So I really think that I highly recommend that as a way to just kind of, and then at the same time, you're unlocking your ability to create and think and flow that out of your mind through your pen onto the page. So yeah, these are
No, I
all
think
just,
that's a good point too. There's no, like when it comes to journaling, I think sometimes people think, well, I don't know how to do it, or I don't know what I should do. And I know for myself, on a typical day, I will write out a goal that I have. And I write out some like I am statements from the place of that goal to get me really thinking in the way that I would think having my goal. However, some days, like you said, maybe I'm feeling anxious about something. Maybe something happened, a situation in my life that I wasn't feeling so great about, that I was holding on to. So then I just write it out. Like I write out what happened. And then I'm a very curious person, because I'm especially tapping into the mindset pieces that I work with. So I'm very curious as to why something bothered me so much. Oh, maybe I had an interaction with someone and it rubbed me the wrong way. Why was I so bothered by that? Why did I hold on to that when it really didn't? Like, yeah, everyone's entitled to feel the way they want to, right? But I start to question, and you're exactly right. Like I start to uncover things about myself that probably from like maybe a past relationship or past something that's happened to me that this triggered in me. And then you start to understand yourself more. And so, some days Last Friday, I had such an amazing week. I felt like I had a dream week last week, and I wrote out everything I was grateful for because I thought, you know what? I woke up that morning and I was like, this week is a week I dreamt about, was featured on a virtual TV show. Like, I'm interviewing people for my podcast. I held a workshop for youth at Covenant House here in Toronto. Like, there's all these amazing things I did. I felt so good. I was showing up in my business. I was doing all this stuff, and I was like, I need to write this out because I want to take this feeling into my Friday. I want to kickstart my day this way. And I'm journaling early. It's like 5 in the morning because I wake up very early. And so, you could journal at any time. You could do it before bed, whatever. But yeah, so there's no rules. Like, what we're trying to say here is you can do whatever you want. Like, there are absolutely no rules to this. It's just, like you said, almost a brain dump. And then as well, I think what's really key, and on this podcast, I talk about this a lot, like how the mind and body works together is everything starts with a thought, and then a thought generates a feeling in the body, and we act based off how we feel. So if something's bothering you and you can write it out and get through it so you can start to think better thoughts to feel better, you're going to be more inclined to take those actions. And this whole point in like using creativity, which is really tapping into you, it's like tapping into what brings you the most joy, tapping into what you value, what you find fun, what you find relaxing, whatever you want to feel to live a more fulfilled life every day, reconnecting to that and then starting to get into those feelings and taking those actions every single day.
I really love what you talk about a lot, about curiosity, because that unlocks creativity too. That is creativity when you get curious about things and you just start asking questions. And when you're doing that, it's like self-exploration, and this is just all part of it because life is an adventure too, and we're not meant to, when I was younger, I used to have all these goals. Like when I was in high school, I wanted to have my PhD by the time I was 24, and I was going to be Dr. Adrienne. At the time, my maiden name was Baker, so it was that. But I had no idea how I was going to accomplish that by such a young age. And of course, I didn't do that, but I didn't even care what I was a doctor in. I just wanted to have a PhD, which is silly, but it's just, I always thought that, I'd plan everything out and then this is where I would go. And then what would happen then? Life would just stop and I would it was almost like I thought I would come up with the idea of what I wanted to do and who I wanted to be. Then it was all about trying to get there as fast as possible. And then I would just stay there forever, I guess. But that's not the way life works. And that's not the way
No.
it should work because we're just on we're exploring a new trail and we've never been on it before. And we never can go backwards again. We only get to see the scenery once as we go by.
Yeah,
And then
I
it's just
know,
a
it's so
memory.
true. It's
Yeah.
so true. And if you're not taking the time now, like if not now, when? Like, what
Yeah.
are you waiting for? Why are you holding back? And this again, get curious with yourself. Maybe you're taking certain things in your life a little too seriously. Like, let loose a little bit, allow yourself to dream because your life doesn't have to feel shitty. Like, your life doesn't have to feel bad. Sure, your circumstance might be enhancing those feelings, but how can you take a step back? How can you even like, for myself, get outside, get fresh air, whatever it is? How can you incorporate in just a little bit of something that you love to do every single day? Because as you start to do that, even if you only feel good for that 5 minutes that you're doing that thing, that's better than nothing. And you start to feel good. Maybe you come up with it, you think about something, or you just continue to do it. And then you'll start to see the power in that. And then you'll want to do it more. So I know we're getting close to time here. Adrienne, what would you want to leave everyone with? So I know you gave a lot of great tools and tips, but so what do you want to leave them with when it comes to using creativity to bring joy and fulfillment into their daily life?
I would say start by making a little list, whether it's on paper. I encourage you to write it down. What are some of the things that you always wanted to do that you just never felt like you were good enough, or you put it off, or you just, for whatever reason, you didn't do it? For me, it was watercolor art. And I don't know if you can see behind me my paintings, but that
Beautiful.
was what I that's what nourishes me. When I write, I find it takes a lot of energy, and it is very creative too, but it is fires up my brain but depletes my energy a little bit because I have to go so deep. And so when I paint, it's like a meditation for me, and it makes me feel just absolutely bursting with joy. I feel so calm. I feel at peace. I can't even tell you what it feels like to just sit down and paint for an hour. And I never would have discovered that if I hadn't sat down and kind of written a little list about what are some of the things that I always wanted to do that for whatever reason I just never tried. And then I went out and bought myself some paints. On one of my artist dates when I was working through that book, I went out and bought some paints and brushes and paper, and then went home and started to paint. So I would encourage you to think about one of those things that kind of feels like a creative pursuit, and write a list, and then just start playing with those, and pick one and play with it. Set yourself a little bit of time all by yourself to really focus on that, and just say, this time is for me. I just get to play, and I'm just going to enjoy this, and it's outcome independent. I don't care what the results are. This is all for me. Nobody has to see that. And then just see where that takes you.
I love that. That's amazing. This is just so lovely. I love your energy. I think you gave so much, like such an amazing perspective here today, helping to open people's awareness to tapping into their creativity and even understanding what creativity can mean. So, Adrienne, thank you so much for being here.
You're so welcome, Jane. I had so much fun talking to you today, and I hope your listeners enjoy that.
They absolutely will.